The vast majority of men will traverse their entire existence without ever decoding what women actually respond to. They will purchase romantic gestures. They will compose lengthy messages. They will execute every instruction society programmed into them. And they will still arrive at the end confused, shattered, and isolated, unable to comprehend where the strategy failed. But 5 centuries ago, a man sitting in political exile, stripped of position and power, documented observations so uncomfortable that authorities attempted to destroy his manuscripts. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli, and what he discovered about human behavior, particularly female psychology, was not flattering. It was not poetic, but it was accurate. And today, we are going to examine that harsh, uncomfortable reality that most people actively avoid confronting. If you are not prepared to have your complete understanding of relationships challenged, exit now. But if you want to finally understand the system you have been losing at your entire life, remain. Because after this, you will never perceive women or yourself through the same lens again. Before we proceed, let me establish something clearly. This is not about hatred toward women. This is not about disrespect toward women. This is about understanding women. And there exists a massive distinction between those two positions. You see, Machiavelli was not a bitter individual complaining about the opposite sex. He was a political philosopher, a strategist, a man who studied power structures the way a physician studies anatomy. He did not care about comfortable narratives. He cared about patterns. He observed courts, kingdoms, marriages, political alliances. He watched powerful men get destroyed by the very women they loved. And he watched strategic men thrive because they understood one fundamental principle that most people refuse to accept. People do not respond to what you say, they respond to what you represent. And that single concept is the key to understanding everything we are about to explore. Machiavelli lived in Renaissance Italy, a world of political betrayal, strategic marriages, poisoned alliances, and power held together by nothing but calculated self-interest. In that environment, if you were naive, you did not just lose your relationship, you lost your position, literally. So Machiavelli learned to see the world without the comfortable illusions most people wrap themselves in. And when you strip away those illusions, when you examine human nature with clinical precision, you start to see patterns that are as true today as they were in 1513. Let us begin with the first uncomfortable truth, the illusion of niceness. Here is the first thing Machiavelli would tell you if he were alive today. Being nice is not a strategy. It is a surrender. Now, before you react defensively, hear me completely. There is nothing wrong with being kind. Kindness from a position of strength is one of the most attractive qualities a man can possess. But that is not what most men do. Most men are nice because they are afraid. They are afraid of conflict, afraid of rejection, afraid that if they reveal who they actually are, they will be abandoned. So they smile when they want to confront. They agree when they want to disagree. They contort themselves into shapes they were never designed to take, all in the desperate hope that their compliance will be rewarded with affection. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that it is much safer to be feared than loved if one must choose between the two. Now, most people read that and think he was advocating tyranny. He was not. He was talking about respect. He was observing a fundamental truth about human psychology. People take kindness for granted. They always have. They always will. But they never take strength for granted. Consider this carefully. Think about the relationships you have witnessed in your own life. The men who bend over backwards, who sacrifice everything, who make their entire identity about pleasing their partner. What happens to them? They get disrespected. Not because the woman is malicious, but because nature has programmed human beings to test boundaries. And when those boundaries do not exist, respect evaporates. It is not a conscious choice. It is instinct. A woman does not sit down and think, he is too nice, I am going to disrespect him now. It happens on a level much deeper than logic. When a man has no backbone, something inside her unconscious registers him as unsafe. Not physically unsafe, evolutionarily unsafe. Because for thousands of years, a man who could not hold his ground was a man who could not protect his family. And no amount of modern civilization has rewired that primal code. Machiavelli understood this. He saw it play out in the courts of Florence, Rome, and Milan. The rulers who tried to please everyone ended up pleasing no one. The rulers who stood firm, who had a vision, who were willing to make difficult decisions even when it made them unpopular, those were the ones who commanded loyalty. not just from their subjects, from their wives. So, here is the first brutal truth. Women do not want a nice man. They want a strong man who is capable of being nice. There is a world of difference between those two things. One is a choice, the other is a default, and women can sense the difference in seconds. Now let us talk about what Machiavelli identified as the real currency of attraction. And no, it is not money. It is not physical appearance. It is not even confidence, at least not the way most people understand it. It is power, but not the kind of power you are thinking of. Machiavelli defined power not as dominance over others, but as dominance over yourself, the ability to control your emotions, the ability to walk away, the ability to sit in silence while the world around you screams for a reaction. That is power, and that is what women are fundamentally drawn to. Let me explain why. Machiavelli observed that fortune, which he described almost like a force of nature, favors the bold. He compared fortune to a river that floods, and said that the man who builds levees before the flood is the man who survives. Now translate that into relationships. The flood is emotional chaos, drama, tests, uncertainty. Every relationship has them, and the man who remains unshaken during those floods, the man who does not crumble, who does not beg, who does not lose his identity because someone raised their voice at him, that is the man who earns genuine, lasting attraction. Here is what most dating advice will not tell you. Women test men. They do. It is not manipulation. It is not cruelty. It is biology. On a subconscious level, a woman needs to know that the man she is with can handle pressure. Because if he cannot handle her emotions, how is he going to handle the world? If he falls apart over a disagreement, what happens when real adversity hits? These tests come in different forms. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is an argument over something trivial. Sometimes it is flirtation with someone else, to see if you will react. And here is the key. The test is not about the content. It is about the response. If you react with panic, jealousy, or desperation, you fail. Not because your emotions are wrong, but because your reaction reveals a lack of internal stability. Machiavelli wrote that men judge by the eye rather than by the hand, because everyone can see but few can feel. What he meant was that perception matters more than reality. A man who appears unshakable is treated as unshakable, regardless of what he actually feels inside. And this is not about faking it. It is about training yourself to genuinely become the kind of man who does not crumble under pressure. Because when you do that, something remarkable happens. You stop needing validation. And the moment you stop needing validation from women is the moment they start freely giving it to you. That is the paradox Machiavelli identified centuries ago. The less you chase approval, the more it chases you. All right, we have talked about what does not work. We have talked about the currency of power. Now let us get to the core. The one thing Machiavelli's philosophy reveals about what women truly want. And here it is. Brace yourself. Women want a man with a mission. That is it. That is the brutal, simple, world-shaking truth. A man who has something in his life that matters more than her. Not because she wants to be neglected, not because she wants to feel unimportant, but because a man with a mission is a man with direction. He has gravity. He has purpose. And purpose is the single most attractive quality a human being can possess. Machiavelli dedicated his life to studying leaders, and the one pattern he found across every great leader, every man who commanded armies, built empires, and held the loyalty of thousands, was singular focus. These men did not sit around waiting for approval. They did not build their lives around other people's expectations. They had a vision, and everything else, including love, orbited around that vision. Now here is what happens when you do not have a mission. You make her your mission, and the moment you do that, you have already lost. Because no human being wants to be someone else's entire reason for living. It is too much pressure. It is suffocating. And most importantly, it is unattractive. When you make a woman the center of your universe, you are communicating something devastating. You are telling her that you had nothing going on before she showed up, that your life was empty, that you are incomplete without her. And nothing kills attraction faster than a man who is incomplete. Machiavelli wrote about how rulers who became dependent on allies, rather than their own strength, always met their downfall. The same applies here. A man who becomes emotionally dependent on a woman, who structures his happiness around her mood, her attention, her approval, That man has handed over his power. And once you hand over your power, you never get it back gracefully. Compare that to the man who has a mission. He wakes up with purpose. He is building something. He is growing. He is moving toward a destination that excites him. When he spends time with a woman, it is because he chooses to, not because he has nothing else. That choice is what makes the time valuable. That choice is what makes her feel valued, because she knows she is not filling a void. She is joining something already great. This is the core of Machiavellian attraction. You do not attract what you chase. You attract what you build. Here is another lesson from Machiavelli that most modern men desperately need to hear. Mystery is not a game. It is a survival mechanism. Machiavelli warned leaders never to reveal their full hand. He argued that a prince should appear merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious, but should be flexible enough to adapt when circumstances demanded. Now strip the politics out of that advice and look at it through the lens of relationships. Most men, when they like a woman, dump everything on the table immediately. Their feelings, their insecurities, their entire history, their plans for the future. They think vulnerability equals connection, and in some cases deep into a relationship, it does. But in the early stages, revealing everything is suicide. Here is why. Human beings are wired to value what they have to work for. It is called the effort heuristic. The more effort you invest in understanding something, the more valuable it becomes to you. When you tell a woman everything about yourself in the first week, you have removed the discovery process. You have taken away the mystery that keeps her thinking about you at 2 in the morning. You have essentially handed her the entire book and said, "Here, no need to read it." And what does she do with that book? She puts it on the shelf and forgets about it. Not because it was not good, but because there is no reason to pick it up again. She already knows the ending. Machiavelli understood that people are drawn to what they cannot fully understand. The leaders who maintained an air of unpredictability were the ones who held power longest. Because when people cannot predict you, they pay attention to you. And attention is the precursor to attraction. This does not mean you should lie. It does not mean you should be emotionally unavailable or cold. It means you should reveal yourself in layers, like a great story. You give enough to create interest, but you always leave them wanting more. You share your depth gradually, so that every conversation feels like peeling back another layer of something fascinating. The men who do this naturally, the ones who do not over-explain themselves, who do not seek validation by sharing their feelings prematurely, those are the men women describe as magnetic. They cannot quite explain what it is. They just know they want more. That is not manipulation. That is understanding human psychology. And Machiavelli was the master of it. Now we have to address the elephant in the room. Why do women so often choose men who seem bad for them? Men who are unreliable, emotionally unavailable, even destructive. This is the question that drives nice guys insane. And Machiavelli, without ever directly writing about dating, gave us the perfect answer. In The Prince, Machiavelli wrote that fortune is a woman, and to keep her under control, it is necessary to treat her roughly. Now this quote has been taken out of context by half the internet. He was not advocating for cruelty. He was using the language of his time to make a philosophical point about boldness versus passivity. His argument was simple. Fortune, meaning luck, opportunity, and success, favors those who act decisively. Those who hesitate, who play it safe, who wait for the perfect moment, they get steamrolled by circumstances. The man who moves boldly, even imperfectly, commands fate in a way the cautious man never will. Apply this to relationships. The dangerous man is not attractive because he is dangerous. He is attractive because he is decisive. He does not ask for permission to live his life. He does not wait for a woman to tell him what to do. He moves with certainty. Right or wrong, he moves. And that movement, that sheer momentum of a man who trusts himself enough to act, is intoxicating. The nice guy, by contrast, is always waiting. Waiting for the right moment, waiting for a signal, waiting for permission. And while he is waiting, the bold man has already walked over, introduced himself, and created a moment. Not because he is better, but because he is braver. Women do not want danger. They want a man who is not afraid of it. They want a man who walks toward challenge instead of away from it. And when you look at the so-called bad boys through this lens, you realize they are not chosen because they are bad. They are chosen because they are unafraid. They project a confidence that says, "I can handle whatever comes." And in a world full of uncertainty, That kind of energy is like a lighthouse in a storm. The lesson from Machiavelli is clear. Stop being cautious. Stop overthinking. Stop trying to calculate the perfect move. Act, move, decide. Even if you are wrong, a wrong decision made with confidence is more attractive than no decision made out of fear. This might be the most important section, because this is where most men fail, and this is where Machiavelli's wisdom cuts deepest. The ability to walk away is the ultimate power in any relationship, and most men simply do not have it. Machiavelli argued that a prince must never be so attached to an alliance that he cannot sever it when it no longer serves his interests. He was not talking about being disloyal. He was talking about self-preservation. He was talking about understanding that the moment you cannot walk away from something, you have become its prisoner. In relationships, this manifests in devastating ways. The man who cannot walk away will tolerate disrespect. He will tolerate dishonesty. He will tolerate being treated as an option while treating her as a priority. And every time he stays despite being mistreated, his value in her eyes drops. Not because she is cruel, but because his inability to leave tells her that he has no other options. That he is so desperate for her attention that he will accept any terms, no matter how degrading. Now compare that to the man who can walk away. The man who says calmly and without drama, "I care about you, but I will not accept being treated this way," and then follows through. That man is terrifying in the best possible way, because he has demonstrated something incredibly rare, self-respect that cannot be bought. And here is the paradox that Machiavelli would appreciate. The man who is willing to lose the relationship is usually the one who keeps it, because his willingness to walk shows that his love is a choice, not a dependency. And chosen love is infinitely more valuable than desperate love. This does not mean you should threaten to leave every time there is a disagreement. That is childish. This means you should genuinely build a life so fulfilling, so rich with purpose and meaning, that no single person's absence could destroy it. When you reach that point, walking away is not a tactic. It is simply a natural consequence of knowing your own worth. And when a woman senses that, when she realizes that you love her but you do not need her, that is when she falls deepest. Because she knows your love is real. It is not based on fear or loneliness. It is based on genuine desire. And genuine desire is the only thing that sustains a relationship long term. We have covered a lot, but there is one final truth that ties everything together. And this one Machiavelli never explicitly wrote, but it is embedded in every page of his work. The only thing women truly want is a man who has conquered himself. Not conquered the world, not conquered other men, himself. A man who has faced his own weakness and refused to be defined by it. A man who has looked at his fears and walked through them. A man who has discipline over his emotions, not because he suppresses them, but because he has processed them. A man who does not need external validation because he has done the internal work to know his own value. Machiavelli spent his life studying external power, thrones, armies, alliances, territory. But if you read between the lines, you will notice something. Every leader who failed because of an internal weakness. Arrogance, insecurity, paranoia, dependency on others' approval. And every leader who succeeded did so because they had mastered themselves before they attempted to master their world. The same principle applies to attraction. You can learn every technique, every strategy, every psychological trick in existence. But if you have not done the work on yourself, it is all hollow. Women see through tactics. They always have. What they cannot see through is genuine transformation. A man who has genuinely become strong, disciplined, purposeful, and self-aware does not need tricks. His very presence communicates everything. This is why the journey matters more than the destination. The process of building yourself, of pushing through discomfort, of developing your mind, your body, your skills, your emotional intelligence, that process shapes you into the kind of man who does not need to chase anyone, because you have become someone worth finding. Machiavelli would tell you that the world rewards those who prepare in times of peace, so they are ready for times of war. In the context of your life, that means working on yourself before you need to. Not when you are heartbroken, not when you have been rejected. Now, today. Build the discipline, build the mission, build the mental fortress. Because when the right woman comes along, and she will, you will be ready. Not because you learned some tricks, but because you became someone extraordinary. So let us bring this full circle. What do women want? They want what every human being wants. Strength they can trust, depth they can explore, purpose they can believe in, and a presence that makes them feel safe without making them feel smothered. Machiavelli spent his life decoding power, and the greatest power he ever identified was not military force or political cunning. It was self-mastery. The man who controls himself controls his world, and the man who controls his world naturally attracts those who want to be part of it. Stop chasing, start building. Stop performing, start becoming. Stop asking what women want, and start asking what kind of man you want to be. Because when you answer that second question honestly, and then do the work to become that man, the first question answers itself. Machiavelli's brutal truth is not that women are complicated. It is that most men are lazy. Lazy with their growth, lazy with their purpose, lazy with their self-development. And then they are shocked when the world does not hand them what they want. Do not be that man. Be the man Machiavelli would have written about, not the prince who inherited power, the prince who earned it. If this changed how you see yourself, subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the only person standing between you and the life you want is the version of you that is too comfortable to change.